Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year. And plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. I know there's a lot of great fly fishing podcasts out there today, and I appreciate you listening to Casting Across. That being said, I understand why you did. You know about all my pro deals and all of my ambassadorships with prestigious fly fishing companies. So I'm a pretty clear choice. Now, there's a kernel of truth in that. I do have some quasi-professional relationships with some fly fishing companies, but I'm saying the whole pro deal and ambassador and pro staff thing very, very tongue-in-cheek, and hopefully you can appreciate that. And it's particularly timely, and that may be why it could potentially be offensive, because this is a conversation. The idea of pro staff, the idea of people in the media and others getting discounts has become quite the conversation within a certain small section of the fly fishing world. Now, you might even be saying, I have no clue what you're talking about. That makes you naively blessed, and honestly, that's not a problem. If you don't know what this is about, then skip towards the end where I talk about other things, because it's probably not worth your time. But I think that there are some implications, because no dollar moves within an industry or a market without bumping into other dollars. So that is to say, if money is spent in advertising, or if money is not spent in advertising, if money is spent by setting a fly rod to somebody, or money is spent in selling a fly rod to somebody, one or the other, then that is going to impact the ultimate bottom line of how you, the consumer, interacts with those brands, those shops, and those products. Money doesn't move around in a vacuum. In an economy, money bumps into each other. So the idea of pro staff, which, again, pro staff doesn't mean professional. Goodness, I wouldn't have absolutely zero professional relationships with companies if it meant like professional angler. It means promotional, that they are putting products in the hands of people that other people will then see, which I think is great. I think it's a totally reasonable way to market and advertise. Honestly, I think that you having your gear in the hands of guides, if you are a fly fishing company, is the best way to get exposure. Somebody spends $400 on a half-day guided trip. They cast a rod. They get into fish. They really enjoy it. They look down at the label and they say, "Oh, it's brand X," and the guide says, "Yeah, I love brand X." They go home and they seriously consider buying brand X. They had 4 hours of real fishing conditions with it, which is totally different and much better than wiggling around in a fly shop. So I think that that's a wonderful idea. And similarly, having someone who is in the media, whether they be a big name or a small name like castingacross.com, write about your nippers or your reel or your line or your shirt or whatever it might be, and giving some real world examples of it, in use, pictures of it in use, that might speak volumes compared to a half-page advertisement in print media. So I think that the idea of pro staff and the idea of ambassadors for companies it really is a great 21st century way to inform the angling public, the fly fishing community, about what you have to sell and how it can benefit them. Now, where we've kind of jumped the shark is this 21st century social media situation. And I think that's probably the biggest culprit in moving this whole conversation at such a speed that the cart is kind of jackknifing around the horses as they're plummeting down the hill, which is an awful image if you are an animal lover or a cart manufacturer for that matter. But what's happened is you have social media influencers. And again, these are people who just post pictures on the internet and they generate followers. And so if they have a yellow widget hanging off their vest in every one of those pictures, there's a perceived value that yellow widget equates to more fish. And so the person who produces the yellow widget says, hey, we also sell a blue widget. Can you have that on the other side of your vest in all your pictures? Because our yellow widget sales have spiked in direct correlation to your Insta fame rising. So we would like to add a blue widget to your arsenal. And the person gladly says, sure, I don't mind. And they get their blue widget. Well, this is well known because, you're on social media, you're looking at pictures, and the people tag these companies, and they even have it in their profile. They even say they're pro staff, and other people say, wow, I catch lots of fish, like at What's Her Face or at What's His Face, and hey, widget manufacturer, or let's go even bigger, boat manufacturer. I could really expose your company simply by you sending me a boat and my 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 followers seeing me fish out of your boat. And so now it's a chase. It's a chase to try to get more followers so you can have more cred so you can get more stuff so you can get more followers, and pretty soon you're the king of fly fishing, which of course lands you the finest seat on the finest drift boat in all of Colorado, which I'm not sure where that is or what that is, but I think hopefully illustrates that it's really a vain pursuit, and all you're doing is perpetuating the cycle of just chasing after the wind. Now, I think it's important for me at this point to insert a little bit of transparency. As I mentioned, I do have a professional relationship with a few fly fishing companies. Now, that being said, I'm not a full-time fly fishing guide. I'm not even a full-time fly fishing media personality. I have a whole nother job, a whole nother life. This is just what I do for fun on the side. But part of what I do for fun is write about products. So I don't see this as me being sneaky. When you read a review of a product on Casting Across, I'm doing that because I want to do that. I will say, in complete honesty, that early on, within that first year, I was trying to figure out, how do we do this? So there's some products I reviewed. I probably wouldn't, review again, but it was a learning experience. Some relationships I formed I probably wouldn't have formed if I had the chance to do it over again. But by and large, as I've gotten into the groove, the last 2-3 years, I've been given products, I've bought products, and everything in between. And actually, that's a great example. And this is something that the article that appeared recently on Angling Trade, and that's another thing that's kind of stimulated this conversation. Kirk Deeter put an article up called Brainstorming on the Pro Deal Conundrum on Angling Trade, and I'll talk more about that at the end in the recommendation portion, especially how to get access to it. But he talks about, not liking to get a product, review it, and mail it back. And for him, that's awesome. I mean, he's a professional fly fishing media and, industry member. I do it on the side. So honestly, for me to fish the newest rod, I'd love to do that, just because that's the kind of thing I like. To me, it's not an intrusion into my fly fishing or into my riding to get a brand new rod, especially if it's a really cool rod, and fish it for a day, for a week, for a month, and then write about it and send it back, as long as postage is prepaid, because those are 10 important dollars. But I like doing that. It's fun for me. And so you'll see when I write, I don't say, here's the review of this fly rod, and I was given this $500 fly rod for free, or I was given a 75% discount on this fly rod, or I was given a 25% discount on the fly rod, or I paid full price for this fly rod, or I was sent this fly rod for a month and I sent it back. I don't put any of that stuff in there. And it's not to, obfuscate journalistic integrity. What it is meant to do is honestly kind of present a different approach. Castingacross.com, it's not traditional just nuts and bolts reviews. Hopefully it's perceivable that it's a little bit organic in that you've got narrative that flows into review, that flows into interview, that flows into editorial opinion, that flows into op-ed opinion kind of stuff. And it all creates kind of an organic, different thing. I didn't want to do what other people do. Other people do great things, and there's great websites out there that do way better reviews than I do. But, if I write about a fly rod, I write about my experience and perspective with that fly rod. If I think it stinks, either I won't write about it or I will tell you that I think it stinks. But that's I think one of the differences is that, manufacturers and companies have a different relationship between the biggest names and smaller names. And I think that's important to realize. But anyway, this article is great, and I agree with virtually everything he says. I think it's some really good perspectives. Some of the things I think are policies and ideas that companies should adopt when it comes to their marketing through pro deals. Little things like kicking out people who abuse the plan. Set a very high standard for behavior. Because especially for smaller companies, like this is your livelihood. Like if you could sell, 5 widgets, but you gave 2 widgets away, and one of those didn't go into the hand that you want it to go to, they gave it to their buddy, and their buddy has zero influence, isn't going to do any promotional work for you. I mean, that's a big deal. Even if you're the largest company out there, it's just still fly fishing. It's still kind of small fish in a small pond. So it does matter. Again, all those dollars bump into other dollars around there somewhere. And that's where, if you're not involved in this, you're not embroiled in the controversy, you should, I think, at least be aware of it in some way, shape, or form, because your price for a product is influenced in some way, shape, or form by what somebody else is or is not spending on that product. So, and not to get into the nitty-gritty of the article, because I don't want to review his article because I think it's really good, but the one thread that is woven throughout it is the idea of integrity. Integrity on behalf of the fly fishing companies and integrity on behalf of those who they have relationships with. I think in the race to get your gear in front of as many eyes as possible, some companies have felt this pinch of losing track of who's got their stuff. And who's getting it at a discount. And so consequently, Kirk Deeter in this article opens with the story of a guy walking into a fly shop, not buying a fly rod, but saying that his buddy who has a pro deal with a company is going to hook him up with a fly rod. Now, that's wrong. It's really unfortunate for that fly shop owner who essentially is perceiving a lost sale, but it's bad for that company who is thought they had an agreement with somebody and it's being abused. It's also just personally bad. It's dishonest. I mean, in these contracts between companies and individuals for these pro deals, it kind of stipulates this is what you're going to do. This is when you're going to do it. This is what you can't do. This is how we want you to conduct yourself. So for somebody to do that when they've been given a privilege, to get a discount or get free stuff, it's just dishonest, and it's not the kind of integrity that you want to model for your life. Not to moralize the situation, but I think a lot of this stuff just comes down to just proper decency. How would you want somebody to treat your parents' general store? Now, how many people have a mom and dad that have a mom and pop shop? But there's no nameless, faceless corporations, especially in fly fishing. Even the largest conglomerates there's people, and I've shaken their hands, and they're normal, and they're not living in mansions. So I think we need to remember that this is a relatively small industry. One of the emphases that Kirk Deeter puts in this article that I really applaud and think is awesome is his real heart for fly shops, because they ought to be the lifeblood of the fly fishing industry. As much as the internet can do, whether it be more traditional kind of articles and magazines, kind of maybe where you'd put most of what I write in that category, or in the newer social media, none of that takes the place of talking face-to-face with an educated, informed, personable individual that can hear you out, who can see your body language, who can see your casting stroke and make recommendations based upon that out of the hopper of preferred gear, potential relationships with companies they may have, and say, you look like this, you look like you need that, here's what I have to offer you. More than that, there's face-to-face communication. There is a common area where not just people going to buy gear congregate, but people congregate. And so that comes through in the article also, that the fly shop matters. And so something that he advocates is having fly shops be able to provide the discount and the pro deal in some way to guides or to media members. I think that's awesome, especially for some of the larger companies that have company stores, company branded stores. And one of the big critiques against just two I could throw out there would be Orvis, Patagonia, is that they're impersonal. They don't have that feel of a normal fly shop. And I love both of those brands for different reasons, but I think this would be a great idea for them, for somebody who is a guide to stroll into the local Orvis company store and be able to get their discount and their special promotional items that month. I think that would be a great way to bolster that store's reputation, that brand's reputation, and also kind of funnel more foot traffic into there from some of the people you want walking into the store. I think that is an understated element of the fly fishing industry. The caliber and the type of people that you have in your fly shop has a real big impact on how that fly shop is perceived. And I'm not making any sort of class judgment or anything like that. I'm just saying that fly shops that have guides and who have people who are fishing a lot and having an impact in their community, whether it be through conservation, whether through writing, whatever it is, people perceive that. People know that because it is the hub of activity regarding kind of fly fishing culture and community. And that's also where, and to kind of tie things back around, I know I've been talking about something that you may not care about for 15 minutes now. That's where the people who aren't plugged into the social media, aren't plugged into the latest buzz on the internet, who aren't plugged into the backroom talk at the fly shop, that is where they encounter people doing it for real. It's at the fly shop. It is on the riverbank. It's at the parking lot while people are lacing and unlacing their boots. That's what'll sell products eventually, in a way that kind of reinfuses that integrity and that community that so often is kind of promoted as an image on Instagram or on the back page of the catalog and the full page ad. This idea of just what makes fly fishing what we enjoy, which is sharing something. So I'm not opposed to pro deals. I thankfully have benefited from them in the past, and I really appreciate the brands that I work with. And I think that it's a great way to expose people to new things, and also to, again, revisit older products, which is something I love to do, is to take something that seems insignificant and bring it back to the light of those who are reading or listening to what I have to say. And the last thing that I think is worth mentioning is that, again, this is a small but vocal minority of people that are having this conversation. I don't think it's not worth having, but I think we need to keep things in perspective. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily an echo chamber thing, but I think that it only touches on a small fragment, but a visible and vocal fragment of the fly fishing community. So if you're on the outside, and again, you've stuck with me through nearly 20 minutes of this, just know that this is out there, and know that this is impacting the bottom line of what you pay for a $100 fly line or a $500 fly rod. But more than that, support your local fly shop, talk to your local guide, and really at the end of the day, just have integrity. Whether you are someone who has a pro deal or somebody who doesn't have one, fish for the sake of catching fish. And if those other things come along to you, then awesome. Then enjoy them and appreciate those relationships. Understand and enjoy the richness of knowing the person who makes your flies, your rods, your hats, whatever it is, and see how you can work together to not just make a buck, but to catch a fish, to preserve a resource. I think those kind of things are what make you not just the ambassador of a brand or a product, but make you an ambassador of the sport. Now, if that sounds cheesy, I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel, and hopefully, this has stimulated some thought for you. This week on castingacross.com, I review a product. I review the First Mate fly patch from Pirate Fly Fishing. Small company who I've had a great relationship with. We've worked together on a couple of projects. This is an awesome fly patch that is rigid and Velcro on the back. Has some awesome magnets on the side, beautiful brook trout print on the front. This is something that I'm using and I'll use, and I think you should check it out. So head over and check out my review of that. Next article called Tails, Fins, Gills, and Becoming a Better Fly Fisher. This details my experience of laying for hours and hours and hours in a rock watching trout. What would possess me to do such a thing? You'll have to read to find out. Today's recommendation is the article that I mentioned earlier on angling trade. Angling trade is the buzz and the fly fishing biz, is their little tagline. And there's all sorts of great stuff on there. They don't promote themselves like a lot of the traditional fly fishing magazines do, because there are some more industry inside stuff that is featured that isn't particularly pertinent for everyday average fly fishers. But if you are at all interested in branding, if you're interested in kind of what is moving the needle, especially this time of year with iCast, and then again in the winter with the fly fishing show circuits, it's definitely worth checking out. But you go to anglingtrade.com, and the article is called Brainstorming on the Pro Deal Conundrum. Not a lot of people have weighed in. I'm kind of surprised. The time of the recording, there's only 8 comments, but I've seen this all over people's social media feeds. Other people said they're going to weigh on it later. I'm not doing this to weigh in first. I'm doing this because I read it. I wanted to podcast prior to the drop date of my next one, and it just seemed like a worthwhile conversation. That being said, if you have thoughts about this, definitely let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. You can leave a comment on the show notes, the bottom of the page of this podcast on the website. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast in iTunes. Then head over to castingacross.com, where you'll find more info on this podcast and 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.